He was a single cowboy, grizzled and bitter, until his spirited daughter stepped off that dusty stagecoach with a beautiful black woman whose presence would shatter everything he thought he knew about family. The townsfolk whispered cruel words about the hermit rancher, dismissing him as a broken man destined to die alone on his failing ranch. But when the educated woman arrived with secrets that could destroy or redeem them all, she forced the cowboy to choose between his prejudices and his only child. Hidden beneath her dignified silence lay a truth so explosive it would either unite this fractured family or tear them apart forever, while dangerous men from her past closed in with intentions that threatened everyone she'd grown to love. Would the cowboy's awakening heart become their salvation? Or would his daughter's shocking revelation destroy the last chance any of them had at belonging? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Jonah Kane hammered another loose board on his fence. Sweat dripped from his weathered face onto the dry earth below. 3 years of working this ranch alone had taken its toll. The once prosperous spread now barely held together with makeshift repairs and stubborn determination. Inside the general store, Martha Henderson leaned across the counter toward Sheriff Marcus Tull. Her voice carried the excitement of fresh gossip. The hermit's daughter was finally coming home. Clara had sent word from Austin that she was bringing a guest. Tull shook his head slowly. That poor girl probably had no idea what she was walking into. Her father had become a ghost of his former self since Sarah's passing. Jonah rode into town that afternoon with reluctant steps. The stagecoach would arrive soon, and he couldn't avoid meeting Clara any longer. 2 years felt like a lifetime. He wondered if she would even recognize the man he'd become. The coach rounded the corner in a cloud of dust. Jonah straightened in his saddle as Clara stepped down. Her smile was as bright as he remembered, but something else caught his attention. A second woman descended gracefully from the coach. She was tall, elegant, with skin the color of rich mahogany and eyes that held quiet strength. Clara rushed forward and embraced her father. Behind them, the beautiful stranger gathered her simple belongings with practiced dignity. Whispers rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Stares followed the woman's every movement. Clara turned toward her companion with obvious affection. This was her dearest friend from the mission school, she explained. Eliza Turner had traveled all this way to see the frontier. Jonah studied the woman's face. Intelligence sparked behind her calm exterior. Her posture spoke of education and refinement that seemed out of place in their dusty town. The trio made their way to Henderson's store for supplies. Martha's usual welcoming smile vanished the moment they stepped inside. She busied herself with inventory, pointedly ignoring their presence. Other customers whispered behind their hands and shot disapproving glances. Eliza maintained her composure despite the obvious hostility. She examined the limited selection of books with genuine interest. When she quoted a passage from Shakespeare, Martha's jaw dropped in surprise. Educated or not, certain boundaries would not be crossed in Clearwater Ridge. The boarding house owner flatly refused to rent rooms. Clara's face flushed with anger, but Eliza placed a gentle hand on her arm. They would stay at the ranch, she said quietly. There was no need for confrontation. The ride to the Kane homestead passed in uncomfortable silence. Jonah stole glances at his mysterious guest. She sat with perfect posture, taking in the landscape with appreciative eyes. Whatever brought her to Texas, she seemed determined to make the best of it. The ranch house stood like a monument to better times. Sarah's flower garden had long since withered. The porch sagged under neglect. Eliza surveyed the scene without judgment, her expression thoughtful rather than critical. That evening, Clara prepared dinner while Jonah tended to the horses. Through the kitchen window, he watched Eliza examining his ailing cattle with surprising interest. She moved among them with confidence, studying their symptoms with what appeared to be professional knowledge. Over supper, Clara shared stories from the mission school. She spoke of children eager to learn and families struggling to build new lives. Eliza contributed thoughtful observations about education and social progress. Her words revealed a depth of understanding that challenged Jonah's assumptions. Sheriff Tull arrived the next morning with a warning wrapped in friendly concern. Some folks were already talking about the situation. Wade Bronson had called for a town council meeting. It might be wise for the guest to consider moving on before things got complicated. Clara's response shocked everyone present. Eliza wasn't just a guest or even a friend. She was Clara's wife. They had been married by a progressive minister in Austin 2 months earlier. The words hit Jonah like a physical blow. His daughter's life had taken a turn he never could have imagined. The revelation sent ripples through the small community. Wade Bronson made his displeasure known to anyone who would listen. Change was coming whether they wanted it or not, and some people would fight it with everything they had. Jonah found himself torn between love for his daughter and fear of social consequences. Clara had always been headstrong, but this decision would affect them all. Eliza, for her part, began quietly packing her belongings. She had overheard enough conversations to know her presence threatened the fragile peace Clara sought with her father. The cattle grew sicker by the day. Jonah faced the possibility of losing his entire herd to whatever disease had taken hold. Without the cattle, the ranch would fail completely. His world was crumbling from multiple directions at once. That's when Eliza stepped forward with knowledge that would change everything. She had studied animal medicine alongside her nursing training. Her grandfather had been a veterinarian who taught her to recognize symptoms others might miss. The cattle weren't suffering from disease at all. They had been poisoned by contaminated water from the upstream mine. As Eliza worked to save his livelihood, Jonah began to see her through different eyes. This woman who faced hatred with dignity possessed skills that could preserve his family's legacy. The question now was whether he would find the courage to defend the person who might be their salvation. Eliza moved through the sick cattle with practiced precision. Her trained eye cataloged symptoms that Jonah had dismissed as disease. The animals showed signs of mineral poisoning, not infection. She knelt beside a weakened calf and examined its eyes and gums. The telltale discoloration confirmed her suspicions. Years earlier, her grandfather had taught her to read the land as carefully as any medical textbook. Samuel Turner had been one of the few black veterinarians in the country before the war. He raised Eliza after her parents died, filling her mind with knowledge that most people assumed she couldn't possess. Every lesson had been earned through his determination to give her weapons against an unkind world. She traced the water source upstream to an abandoned copper mine. Runoff had been leaching toxic minerals into the creek for months. The solution required immediate action and careful treatment. Eliza outlined a plan that would save the herd if implemented quickly enough. Jonah watched in amazement as she mixed compounds with the confidence of someone who had done this before. Her movements were economical and sure. Within hours, the cattle began showing signs of improvement. The woman his neighbors scorned had just saved his ranch from financial ruin. Word of the miraculous recovery spread through town with suspicious speed. Wade Bronson arrived that afternoon with 3 other council members. They demanded an explanation for the sudden turnaround. When Jonah credited Eliza's expertise, the men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Such knowledge in her hands challenged their fundamental beliefs about natural order. The town council meeting convened 2 days later in Henderson's store. Wade stood before the assembled crowd like a prosecutor building his case. He spoke of tradition and proper boundaries. Change was one thing, but some changes went too far. The community needed to take a stand before things got out of hand. Clara rose to her feet with fire in her eyes. She had heard enough whispered comments and seen enough cruel stares. Her voice carried across the room as she defended not just Eliza, but the very concept of judging people by their character rather than their appearance. Some faces in the crowd showed shame. Others hardened with stubborn resolve. Eliza stood beside Clara with quiet dignity. When challenged about her education, she quoted Shakespearean sonnets from memory. She discussed philosophy and medical theory with fluency that left several men speechless. Her composure under attack revealed strength that commanded unwilling respect. Sheriff Tull found himself caught between law and conscience. The situation presented no clear legal violations, but community peace hung in the balance. He had sworn to protect all citizens, though some residents questioned whether that protection extended to everyone equally. The meeting ended without resolution, but battle lines had been drawn. Wade's supporters remained vocal in their opposition. A smaller group began questioning whether their assumptions about Eliza might be wrong. Most people fell somewhere between the extremes, unsure which direction the wind would blow. 3 days later, Mary Caldwell went into labor during a thunderstorm. Her husband rode desperately through town seeking the doctor. Dr. Hutchins was delivering another baby across the county and couldn't return until morning. Mary's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and the baby seemed determined to arrive early. Several women gathered at the Caldwell cabin, but none had experience with complicated births. The baby was positioned wrong, and Mary was losing strength fast. Someone suggested sending for Eliza, who had medical training from her nursing studies. The suggestion sparked heated debate among the women present. Clara arrived with Eliza despite the objections. Eliza assessed the situation quickly and saw the danger immediately. The baby needed to be turned, and Mary required immediate intervention to prevent hemorrhaging. She had assisted with dozens of difficult births during her training at a charity hospital in New Orleans. Her grandfather had insisted she learn every aspect of healing, from animal medicine to human anatomy. Those lessons, earned through years of studying by candlelight, now meant the difference between life and death for 2 people. Eliza worked through the night with steady hands and calm determination. Dawn broke as Mary's healthy son took his first breath. Mother and child were weak but stable. The women who had witnessed the birth looked at Eliza with newfound appreciation. She had saved lives that would have been lost without her intervention. News of the successful delivery spread faster than gossip usually traveled. Martha Henderson, who had been present during the birth, found herself defending Eliza's actions to anyone who questioned them. She had seen skill and compassion that transcended any social boundaries her community might have constructed. Jonah felt pride swelling in his chest as he watched his daughter and her wife work together. Clara managed the ranch with efficiency that impressed him daily. Eliza's knowledge extended beyond medicine to agriculture and animal husbandry. Together they were transforming his struggling operation into something that might actually prosper. The opposition hadn't disappeared, but cracks were forming in their unified front. Some people began greeting Eliza politely on the street. Others still crossed to the opposite sidewalk when they saw her coming. Change was happening slowly, one person at a time. Wade Bronson sensed his influence slipping and prepared for a final confrontation. He had built his reputation on maintaining traditional order. If that order crumbled, his position in the community would crumble with it. The stakes had become personal, and he intended to fight for every inch of ground. Eliza noticed the hostile stares intensifying rather than diminishing. Something was building toward a breaking point, and she feared the consequences might extend beyond her own safety to threaten the family she had grown to love. The Sunday service at Clearwater Ridge Methodist Church had never seen such tension. Families who had worshiped together for decades now sat on opposite sides of the aisle. Jonah walked through the doors with Clara and Eliza flanking him. His decision sent a clear message to everyone present. Reverend Matthews struggled through his sermon on Christian charity while hostile stares burned holes in the back pew. Eliza sat with perfect posture, her hymnal open to the correct page. Her voice joined the congregation in song with a clarity that made several people turn around in surprise. Even her worship challenged their assumptions. After the service, Margaret Caldwell approached with her newborn son. She thanked Eliza publicly for saving both their lives. Her husband stood beside her, hat in hand, adding his grateful words. The gesture created ripples through the gathered crowd. Some nodded in approval. Others turned away in disapproval. Wade Bronson watched the exchange with growing frustration. His carefully constructed opposition was cracking under the weight of Eliza's actions. People were beginning to see her as an individual rather than a symbol of unwanted change. He needed to reassert control before his influence disappeared entirely. That afternoon, 2 strangers arrived on the eastbound stage. They wore expensive suits and carried leather briefcases that marked them as men of business. Their questions centered on Eliza Turner's whereabouts and current circumstances. Sheriff Tull provided cautious answers while studying their credentials with professional suspicion. The men took rooms at the boarding house and made discreet inquiries around town. They spoke with bankers and merchants, asking about property values and investment opportunities. Their presence added an element of mystery that had nothing to do with local prejudices. Eliza noticed them immediately and grew visibly nervous. She began checking over her shoulder during routine trips to town. Clara pressed for explanations, but Eliza deflected with vague references to unfinished business from her past. The fear in her eyes suggested something far more serious than unpaid debts. Letters arrived daily at the general store addressed to Eliza. She collected them with trembling hands and burned them in the fireplace without reading them aloud. Clara found fragments of expensive letterhead in the ashes, bearing partial addresses from Boston law firms. The mystery deepened with each delivery. Meanwhile, the community continued its slow transformation. Dr. Hutchins sought Eliza's assistance with a difficult surgery, acknowledging her medical knowledge despite his initial reservations. The schoolmarm asked for help teaching advanced mathematics to her brightest students. Eliza's intelligence became impossible to ignore or dismiss. Jonah found himself defending his daughter's choice more frequently. At the feed store, he stood his ground against men who had been his friends for decades. The conversations were heated but civil, reflecting the community's internal struggle with changing times. His transformation from hermit to advocate surprised everyone, including himself. The evening discussions around the cane dinner table revealed Eliza's extensive education. She had studied at a northern college before returning south to teach. Her knowledge of literature, science, and philosophy impressed even Clara, who thought she knew everything about her wife's background. There were depths to Eliza that she kept carefully hidden. Wade Bronson called another meeting to address what he termed the deteriorating situation. Fewer people attended this gathering, and those who came seemed less convinced by his arguments. The successful birth, the saved cattle, and Eliza's obvious intelligence had undermined his position significantly. The strangers attended this meeting as silent observers. They took notes and exchanged meaningful glances, but offered no comments. Their presence made everyone uncomfortable, including Wade, who sensed forces beyond his control at work in his community. Sheriff Tull received a telegram from Boston that confirmed his suspicions about the visitors. They were legitimate attorneys representing a significant estate. Their business with Eliza involved inheritance matters of considerable importance. The details remained confidential, but the implications were enormous. Clara confronted Eliza about the letters and the mysterious visitors. The conversation took place in the barn, where they could speak privately. Eliza's composed facade finally cracked as she revealed fragments of her hidden past. Her grandfather had been more than a veterinarian. He had also been a wealthy white man who acknowledged her as family in his will. The inheritance had been tied up in legal challenges for years. Distant relatives contested the bequest on grounds that reflected the era's prejudices. Recent court decisions had cleared the way for Eliza to claim what was rightfully hers. The amount involved would make her one of the wealthiest individuals in Texas. Eliza had fled to the frontier partly to escape the attention surrounding the case. She wanted to build a life based on love and merit, not money and legal battles. The attorney's arrival meant her past had finally caught up with her chosen future. Jonah overheard enough of the conversation to understand the situation's scope. The woman who faced daily discrimination for her race was about to become richer than most of the people who scorned her. The irony was not lost on him, nor was the potential danger such wealth might bring. Wade Bronson sensed opportunity in the stranger's presence. If Eliza possessed hidden wealth, he wanted to position himself as an ally rather than an enemy. His sudden change of attitude fooled no one, but it demonstrated how quickly principles could shift when money entered the equation. The community stood at a crossroads. Acceptance based on character was one thing, but acceptance based on wealth was something else entirely. The true test of their growth would come when Eliza's secret became public knowledge. The lawyers requested a meeting at the Kane Ranch the following morning. They spread documents across the kitchen table, while Eliza sat with Clara's hand firmly clasped in hers. Jonah positioned himself protectively behind his daughter's chair, his weathered face set with determination. The lead attorney, Mr. Whitmore, outlined the inheritance with businesslike precision. Eliza's grandfather, Samuel Ashworth, had been one of Boston's wealthiest textile merchants. His progressive views on abolition had made him enemies, but his business acumen had made him rich beyond measure. The estate included factories, shipping interests, and substantial real property throughout New England. Eliza listened with growing amazement as the numbers were read aloud. The inheritance totaled more than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. Her grandfather had structured the bequest to provide not just wealth, but power to create change in a world that needed it desperately. The legal battles had consumed 3 years and considerable resources. Distant cousins had challenged every aspect of the will, questioning everything from Eliza's parentage to her grandfather's mental state. Recent court decisions had dismissed all challenges definitively. The inheritance was hers without restriction or condition. Clara squeezed her wife's hand as the reality sank in. The woman who faced daily humiliation for her race had just become one of the wealthiest people in Texas. The irony felt like divine justice wrapped in legal documents and witnessed signatures. Word of the inheritance spread through Clearwater Ridge faster than wildfire. The same people who had refused Eliza's service now appeared at the Kane Ranch with warm smiles and generous offers of friendship. Martha Henderson arrived with fresh baked bread and apologies for past misunderstandings. The banker rode out personally to discuss investment opportunities. Wade Bronson's transformation was the most dramatic and transparent. The man who had called for Eliza's removal now praised her intelligence and refinement to anyone who would listen. He invited her to dinner at his finest table and offered partnerships in various business ventures. His sudden change of heart fooled absolutely no one. Eliza watched the parade of opportunists with growing disgust. These were the same people who had whispered cruel words and crossed streets to avoid her presence. Their acceptance came with a price tag that made it worthless in her eyes. True character revealed itself in adversity, not prosperity. Sheriff Tull observed the community's reaction with professional interest. Human nature displayed its full spectrum within the span of days. Some people showed genuine shame for their past behavior. Others simply calculated new advantages in changed circumstances. The minority who had defended Eliza from the beginning now seemed like prophets vindicated by events. Clara felt proud of her wife's dignity throughout the ordeal. Eliza accepted congratulations graciously while maintaining emotional distance from the well-wishers. She had learned to distinguish between genuine friendship and calculated interest during her years navigating Northern society. The inheritance brought both opportunity and responsibility. Eliza spent hours reviewing financial documents and considering her options. The wealth could purchase acceptance, but it could also fund meaningful change if applied with wisdom and purpose. Jonah watched his daughter and daughter-in-law navigate their new circumstances with growing respect. Clara handled the attention with natural grace, while Eliza demonstrated the poise that came from years of education and refinement. They made decisions together as equal partners, consulting each other on every important matter. The lawyers remained in town for a week, finalizing paperwork and establishing local banking arrangements. Their presence attracted additional attention from neighboring communities. Word of a wealthy black woman in Clearwater Ridge spread throughout the county, bringing curious visitors and potential suitors. Eliza found the constant attention exhausting and intrusive. She had come to Texas seeking a simple life based on love and honest work. The inheritance complicated everything, adding layers of social complexity she had hoped to escape. During a quiet evening on the ranch porch, Eliza revealed her decision to Clara and Jonah. She would accept the inheritance but use it to create lasting change rather than personal comfort. The money represented her grandfather's dream of a more just society. She intended to honor that vision through concrete action. The plan began taking shape over several discussions. Clearwater Ridge needed a school that welcomed all children regardless of race or background. The current schoolhouse was overcrowded and poorly equipped. A new facility with qualified teachers could transform the entire community's future. Eliza also envisioned a medical clinic staffed with trained professionals. The nearest doctor lived a day's ride away, leaving residents vulnerable during emergencies. Her own medical knowledge could serve as the foundation for expanded healthcare services. The business investments would focus on enterprises that provided good jobs and fair wages. Eliza had seen enough poverty to understand its crushing effects on families and communities. Prosperity shared broadly would benefit everyone more than wealth concentrated in few hands. Wade Bronson attempted to insert himself into these planning discussions as a helpful advisor. Eliza politely declined his offers while making her distrust clear through careful words and cool demeanor. His motivations were transparent and entirely self-serving. The inheritance had revealed the community's true character in ways that nothing else could have accomplished. Some people showed genuine capacity for growth and change. Others demonstrated that their prejudices ran deeper than circumstances could reach. The money served as a mirror reflecting everyone's authentic nature. Eliza's grandfather had been wise to structure the inheritance as he did. The wealth came with the implicit expectation that it would be used to advance justice and equality. His granddaughter understood that responsibility and embraced it completely. The town meeting to announce Eliza's plans drew the largest crowd in Clearwater Ridge's history. People packed Henderson's store beyond capacity, while others pressed against the windows from outside. Eliza stood before the assembly with the same dignity she had shown during their harshest criticism. Her proposal was simple, but revolutionary. The new school would welcome every child in the county regardless of background or ability to pay. Classes would cover advanced subjects including science, literature, and mathematics. The building would feature modern equipment and a library stocked with hundreds of books. A medical clinic would operate alongside the school, providing health care to families who couldn't afford private treatment. Eliza would serve as head nurse while recruiting qualified doctors from back east. Emergency services would be available around the clock for the first time in the county's history. The announcement stunned even Eliza's supporters. The scope of her vision exceeded anything the community had imagined. She was proposing to transform their frontier settlement into a center of learning and progress. The investment would total more than most people earned in their entire lifetimes. Wade Bronson jumped to his feet with effusive praise for Eliza's generosity. He volunteered to serve on any planning committee and offered his construction crews for the building projects. His transparent attempt to profit from the situation drew disgusted looks from several attendees. Margaret Caldwell spoke next, expressing gratitude for Eliza's past help and future plans. Other women joined in supporting the medical clinic proposal. They had watched too many children die from treatable illnesses and mothers lost to difficult births. Professional health care could save lives that were currently considered acceptable losses. The schoolmarm endorsed the education initiative with tears in her eyes. She had struggled for years to provide adequate instruction with limited resources. The new facility would give local children opportunities that currently required traveling hundreds of miles to access. Sheriff Tull pledged his department's support for both projects. He understood that education and healthcare formed the foundation of stable communities. Crime rates dropped and prosperity increased when families had access to these basic services. Not everyone embraced the proposals enthusiastically. Several men grumbled about changes happening too fast and outsiders imposing their values on established ways of life. Their complaints lacked the venom of earlier opposition, but revealed lingering resentment. Eliza addressed their concerns directly. She had no intention of forcing anyone to use the new facilities. Parents could choose their children's education, and patients could select their own health care providers. The services would simply be available for those who wanted them. Construction began within weeks of the announcement. Workers arrived from Austin and San Antonio, bringing skills and techniques that impressed local craftsmen. The school building rose on a hill overlooking the town, its modern design symbolizing progress and possibility. Eliza supervised every detail of the construction while maintaining her medical practice. She delivered babies, treated injuries, and diagnosed illnesses with growing confidence in her abilities. The community gradually accepted her expertise as essential rather than unusual. Clara managed the expanding ranch operations with efficiency that amazed neighboring farmers. The inheritance had funded improvements that increased productivity dramatically. New breeds of cattle grazed in improved pastures, while modern equipment reduced labor requirements. Jonah discovered purpose he had lost after Sarah's death. He helped coordinate construction projects and served as an unofficial liaison between Eliza and longtime residents. His transformation from bitter hermit to community leader inspired others who had given up hope for better times. The medical clinic opened first, operating from temporary quarters while the main building neared completion. Dr. Patricia Morgan arrived from Philadelphia with credentials that impressed even skeptical locals. Her partnership with Eliza combined formal medical training with practical frontier experience. Their first major case involved a mining accident that injured 6 men simultaneously. The old system would have required a desperate ride to find the county doctor, likely resulting in preventable deaths. Instead, the injured received immediate professional treatment that saved every life. Word of the successful emergency response spread throughout surrounding counties. Other communities sent delegations to study Clearwater Ridge's medical facility. Some requested similar partnerships with Eliza's organization, expanding the program's influence beyond its original scope. The school's completion coincided with the start of the new term. Children arrived from farms and ranches throughout the region, some traveling daily distances that would have been impossible under the old system. Eliza hired teachers from established Eastern schools, ensuring instruction quality that matched urban standards. The integrated classroom challenged local customs more directly than the medical clinic had. Some families initially kept their children home, rather than allow mixing they considered inappropriate. However, the superior education available gradually overcame most objections. Academic competitions with neighboring schools demonstrated the new facility's effectiveness. Clearwater Ridge students consistently outperformed peers from traditional institutions. Parents who had opposed integration began reconsidering their positions when faced with obvious educational advantages. Wade Bronson's attempts to profit from the projects met with consistent failure. Eliza awarded contracts based on merit and fair pricing rather than political connections. His influence waned as the community realized his opinions no longer carried special weight. The opposition that remained focused on preserving traditional social structures rather than preventing progress entirely. These holdouts represented a shrinking minority that exercised decreasing influence over community decisions. Change had become unstoppable rather than controversial. Sheriff Tull expanded his department to provide security for the new facilities. The added responsibility attracted qualified officers who might otherwise have sought positions in larger towns. Professional law enforcement enhanced the community's reputation throughout the region. Eliza's vision was becoming reality through careful planning and persistent effort. The wealth had provided opportunity, but success required dedication from many people working toward common goals. 6 months later, Christmas Eve snow dusted the rooftops of Clearwater Ridge like powdered sugar on a cake. The town bore little resemblance to the dusty frontier settlement that had greeted Clara and Eliza with suspicious stares and whispered hostility. Gas lamps lined the main street, casting warm circles of light on families hurrying to evening services. The integrated school stood proudly on its hill, windows glowing with activity even after regular hours. Children of all backgrounds gathered for the holiday pageant, their voices blending in harmonious carols that drifted across the valley. Parents who had once forbidden their children from attending now competed for front-row seats at school events. Dr. Morgan locked the clinic doors after treating her last patient of the day. The medical facility had become indispensable to the community, handling everything from routine checkups to emergency surgeries. Her partnership with Eliza had proven so successful that 3 other counties requested similar arrangements for their towns. The Kane Ranch bustled with preparations for their annual Christmas dinner. What had started as a quiet family meal had grown into a celebration that welcomed 24 guests. Margaret Caldwell arrived early with her healthy toddler, followed by Sheriff Tull and his wife, then the school teachers, Dr. Morgan, and various friends who had become chosen family. Clara surveyed the transformed dining room with satisfaction. The house that had stood silent and lonely for 3 years now rang with laughter and conversation every evening. Eliza's presence had awakened not just Jonah from his grief, but the entire home from its mourning. Jonah carved the turkey with steady hands that no longer trembled with loneliness. He had discovered that purpose could cure even the deepest sorrow. His work coordinating community projects gave him reasons to wake each morning beyond mere survival. The hermit who had counted days until death now planned years into the future. Eliza moved gracefully between kitchen and dining room, ensuring every guest felt welcomed and valued. She had found the acceptance she had never dared hope for in Boston society. These frontier families judged her by her actions rather than her ancestry, creating the true equality her grandfather had dreamed of achieving. The dinner conversation reflected the community's transformation. Business owners discussed expansion plans that would create more jobs. Parents shared pride in their children's academic achievements. Dr. Morgan reported declining infant mortality rates and improved overall health statistics. Progress was measurable and visible in every aspect of local life. Martha Henderson offered a public apology for her initial treatment of Eliza. Her shame was genuine and her gratitude sincere. The medical clinic had saved her grandson's life during a severe fever that would have been fatal under the old system. She understood now how prejudice had blinded her to human worth. Sheriff Tull raised his glass to toast the Kane family for bringing positive change to their community. Other guests joined in acknowledging Clara's courage, Eliza's wisdom, and Jonah's transformation. The celebration honored not just the holiday, but the victory of love over fear and understanding over ignorance. Wade Bronson had quietly left town the previous month after his business practices faced increased scrutiny. His departure removed the last vocal opposition to the community's new direction. Those who remained either embraced the changes or kept their disagreements private rather than public. The school's success attracted new families to settle in Clearwater Ridge. Young couples with children sought communities that offered superior education and health care. The population had grown by nearly half since the projects began, bringing prosperity that benefited everyone. Property values increased as demand for homes near the school and clinic rose steadily. The inheritance that had initially seemed like individual good fortune had become community wealth through wise investment and generous sharing. Eliza's vision of shared prosperity was becoming reality. Local businesses thrived as the expanded population created new markets for goods and services. The general store, blacksmith shop, and other establishments hired additional workers to meet growing demand. Economic opportunity replaced the scarcity mentality that had previously dominated local thinking. The evening's entertainment featured musical performances by school children and readings from advanced literature students. The level of accomplishment displayed would have impressed audiences in much larger cities. Rural children were receiving education that prepared them for any future they chose to pursue. As the celebration continued into the night, Jonah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. His daughter's shocking announcement had initially felt like the end of his world. Instead, it had marked the beginning of a richer life than he had ever imagined possible. Clara and Eliza exchanged loving glances across the crowded room, their happiness evident to everyone present. Their marriage had weathered community opposition and emerged stronger through shared purpose. They had built not just a life together, but a legacy that would benefit generations. The last guests departed near midnight, leaving the family to clean up remnants of their feast. The house fell quiet again, but it was the comfortable silence of contentment, rather than the hollow echo of loneliness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight was perfect. Eliza stood at the window watching snow continue to fall on their transformed community. Her grandfather's dream of using wealth to create justice had found fulfillment in ways he never could have anticipated. Love had proven stronger than hatred, and courage had overcome fear. Jonah joined her at the window, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Clara wrapped her arms around both of them, completing a circle of family that had been broken and made whole again. Outside, Clearwater Ridge slept peacefully under its blanket of snow, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would be better than today.